For Halloween, Jana and Hayden always let Trisha go all out. But for me, they gave me a budget of just $10 to pull something together. This wasn't even remotely close enough to how much I need to get an actual costume. I've tried a few times every year to let them raise my budget by a few dollars, but nothing has worked. They also gave Trisha the brand new smartphone every time it came out. She never had to scream or beg for anything. Unfortunately for me, I was on my knees begging a few times for the cheapest flip phone available. Hey, I'm Sarah, and I'm so glad that the holiday season has finally come. I love the holidays, and I always make sure to go all out for the kids that I care for at my job. Though I seem all happy now, Christmas used to be a source of emotional pain for me. You see, my adoptive family was the cause of all of this trauma. I'll explain everything from the beginning to the end, all the way up to the moment that I left them. My parents, Jana and Hayden, used to love me very much. I knew that they had adopted me because Jana found out that she was infertile. Jana and Hayden always took me to theme parks and spoiled me like crazy. I was happy to live with parents that actually cared about me. But only about a few months after I had joined the family, Mom and Dad had a miracle. Jana became pregnant with a baby girl. After my baby sister Trisha was born, Mom and Dad were absolutely obsessed about her. My parents stopped spoiling me completely. They now did the opposite. When we went out, they'd get Trisha anything that she could ever want. However, they berated me if I even asked for the cheapest item available. Because I was only 5 when my sister was born, I was only upset and never understood why they would just suddenly refuse to get me anything. Now that I was older, though, it seemed perfectly clear. Everywhere we went, Jana would introduce Trisha as her miracle baby. Soon enough, my sister being the miracle baby became real old, though Jana didn't care at all. There was one time where my mom was supposed to just take us and our family's dog for a checkup, but spent 30 minutes talking about Trisha. I could tell that the veterinarian was pissed, but didn't want to say anything.
Oh, hey, Susan. I don't think I've introduced you and my kids. This is Sarah, my beautiful daughter. And this is Trisha. Oh, she was my miracle baby. We had Sarah because I didn't think it'd be possible for me to have a child of my own. But then, Hay and I managed to sprout little Trisha. Isn't she just beautiful?
Oh, yes, she is.
She's been such a bright star in my life that her photos are in my wallet and phone case. She's only 4, but she has so much ahead of her, and I'm so proud of our family for being able to have Trisha.
That's so cute. So let's get started with your dog.
Do you know what her first word was? It was puppy, because she had just seen a dog cartoon on TV. Isn't that the cutest?
Yes, Jana. So the dog...
She ended up liking puppies so much that we got her one. She even named him. His name is Bruno.
I'm not going to go through that whole conversation again, but just the beginning is enough to tell you everything that you need to know. The vet ended up trying to avoid Jana as much as possible, only coming into the room to inspect our dog and make small comments on his health. Anyway, this is just one of the many examples of how my family ended up being super toxic and only caring about my younger sister. For Halloween, Jana and Hayden always let Trisha go all out. But for me, they gave me a budget of just $10 to pull something together. This wasn't even remotely close enough to how much I need to get an actual costume. I've tried a few times every year to let them raise my budget by a few dollars, but nothing has worked. They also gave Trisha the brand new smartphone every time it came out. She never had to scream or beg for anything. Unfortunately for me, I was on my knees begging a few times for the cheapest flip phone available. My only reasoning was that I needed it for communication, and the truth was, I really did. Trisha always used her phone for games or social media. Anyway, my phone was one of the only things that I was ever allowed to get after my sister was born. As time went on, I had to learn to be more and more independent, while Trisha just sat back and everything came to her as she wished. Teenage me was extremely angered at everything I had to do, but now I think that working harder for myself was one of the most useful things I'd ever done. I remember needing to apply for my own part-time job, seeing as Mom and Dad never let me have an allowance. I also had to fill out my own legal forms for the job and find a way to transport to work, too. Other things I remember doing was washing my clothes, cooking food, and most importantly, managing schoolwork and time. I will never forget those days in high school when Hayden went to the school to demand that Trisha was given good grades for her classes. Everybody knows that your grades are based on hard work from yourself, but Trisha hadn't gotten good grades. so our dad went to very different measures to help her manage. It was completely unfair, but you can't really stop a dad who was too lenient and had money. So that happened as well. One of the worst things, in my opinion, though, was having to watch Trisha open her mounds of gifts while I was forced to sit there and watch her open and have fun with each of them. Every year I only got socks or nothing as a gift for Christmas, and so I was basically tortured having to watch her. Of course, Trisha's birthday was also celebrated every year. She got a huge party with balloons and special guests, all planned out by party planners that were quite expensive, to say the least. Trisha was allowed to invite as many people as she wanted, and I am not kidding when I say that Trisha was very popular amongst her classmates. And with all of the love and attention for her, I was treated in complete contrast. I never got a birthday celebration, and the only time I got a gift was on my 16th birthday. My little sister had given me a small card with a $20 gift card. That was pretty nice of her. But other than that, I didn't get anything else. The most traumatizing moment that sort of sealed the deal for me was Christmas when I was 17. My whole family was invited to a big Christmas reunion, and they were quite ecstatic. Mom and Dad told me to prepare presents for all of my cousins and nieces and nephews. I was pretty happy to meet them for the first time, and I wanted to leave a good first impression on them, so I worked more hours at my job and bought many nice gifts for them. I was actually quite excited too. I thought that maybe I'd finally get a gift from them, since this was my family and maybe they're nicer than Jana and Hayden. So on Christmas Eve, our parents drove Trisha and me to their great-aunt's house. She was very rich, and I only found this out because we drove into the driveway of a huge mansion. I still remember lugging all of the gifts I had with me to the house. My sister did too, but someone soon came over and helped her with carrying her presents. We went inside and there were way more people than I expected. I was quite nervous, but I decided to hide, and luckily, not many people noticed me. Dinner went by fine. Normally at home, Dad never let me eat too much since he said that he didn't want me wasting his hard-earned money, so I was always a little bit away from being actually full. Since I was on my own at this Christmas dinner, I was able to eat more, and I was happy. I thought, maybe this will be the first Christmas where things will actually go well. So apparently the whole family was supposed to stay at the mansion overnight, and then we all open our gifts in the morning. I found a guest room and fell asleep, hopeful for Christmas morning. I woke up the next day and went downstairs to see most of the family gathered around the tree. I watched as the kids were all given their gifts. Soon enough, though, the gifts for the kids were all passed out and I'd gotten nothing. The family moved on to the adults and they were all given a few gifts each. My heart sank. Where the hell were my gifts? Mom, where are the gifts for me?
What do you mean? This trip was our gift for you. And the dinner last night.
But everybody else has so many gifts. Why don't I have any?
Sarah, don't you dare throw a temper tantrum now.
Sarah, I have a gift for you. Merry Christmas.
This random lady came up to us and handed me a gift. But Mom quickly shoved her handbag into my arms and grabbed the gift out of my hands and opened it. It was a box of chocolates, and my eyes widened in surprise. A smile started spreading across my face, but it quickly diminished. Jana began to spew out some lies about why I couldn't have the chocolate.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Lila. Sarah is severely allergic to hazelnut. I'm so sorry, but thank you for the gift. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. How about I give Sarah $50 instead? No, thank you. You're always too generous. Thank you, though.
I wanted to kick and scream like a toddler at this point. I wasn't allergic to anything at all. In fact, I'd eaten a few hazelnut chocolates before. Was my mom just lying so I wouldn't get any gifts at all? I quickly walked away from my mom and the woman, running to hide in a nearby bathroom. I began to sob, but soon realized I had Jana's purse. I wanted to open it to see when I could book a train to run away, but decided to open the texting app on her phone. I saw a whole list of texts where my mom was telling family members not to get me any gifts. The text said that I was on punishment and needed to learn a lesson, that I would get a different gift another time. This all made sense now. Everyone knew I existed, so why did they not give me a gift? I didn't want to deal with this anymore. So as soon as we got back home, I began packing my necessities, and I booked a train ticket from Trisha's laptop. Some people may find this to be overdramatic, but this had been happening for most of my life, and I was absolutely sick of it. I decided on not leaving a letter since it wasn't worth the effort to write anything for my neglectful parents. And though I resented my sister for not saying anything, she wasn't entirely horrible to me, so I wrote an apology note for her. The following week, I had just turned 18. Now that I was legally an adult, I could go. I snuck out in the morning and walked the 10 minutes to the train station. I got on my train and was finally free. Okay, so maybe it wasn't that easy. It had been 2 hours into my trip when one of the train attendants came up to me and asked if I was the daughter of Jana and Hayden. I said I was, and she told me that they wanted me home and that I needed to go since I was a minor. I quickly showed the woman my license and all of my legal documents. I explained that I was definitely 18 and was allowed to leave home. The attendant left me alone after that. I landed in this new city and things were very tough at first, but since I'd been responsible for myself for a long time and had done good in my high school classes, I was able to find an internship for this tech company. I was also lucky enough to find a welcoming family who let me stay at their home for little rent. Eventually, the tech company offered me a scholarship to one of the top technology universities in the country. I was completely ecstatic and accepted the offer. So then I attended this university and earned my degree. Right after graduation, I got a job at the same tech company again. So that's where I am today. I have a good job, good pay, and now I live in my own apartment with a boyfriend who is very good to me. Of course, I also paid the family that let me live with them back with lots of money and gifts. They still invite me over for Christmas. I finally stopped hating Christmas too. It's pretty cool how I was able to turn my life upside down for the better and get away from my narcissistic family. Oh, speaking of my family, I then recently got a call from Jana on my business number. She had seen my name as one of the main CFOs of the tech company and is now calling to get financial help from me. Mom and Dad are now becoming broke since they continue to get gifts and throw huge parties for Trisha, to the point where she's gotten very popular with kidnappers. Apparently, my parents were also asking for money because of Trisha. She'd been kidnapped and my parents had to pay the ransom money. But then, when Dad went to pick Trisha up, the kidnappers thought that Hayden had alerted the police and beaten him up until he needed to go to the hospital. I was annoyed, since Mom only called me to pay for hospital bills and to pull them out of debt. I instantly smirked and responded to her in a very cold manner. Well, you're on punishment now. I can't give you anything. Isn't that what you told all of my aunts and uncles many years back? See how it feels now? I can't be helping someone that hasn't been there for me for so many years. Bye, Mom. Tell Trisha that I miss her. I ended the call there, and I've gotten text messages from both of my parents and Trisha, but I never responded to any of it. My boyfriend says I was a little too harsh to them, but I don't think so. I would never want to let them leech my money for something that doesn't even benefit me at all. But what do you think? Thank you for listening.
Close to midnight, I heard someone on the front porch, followed a few seconds later by a window in the living room breaking, and then in the darkness, I saw my mother-in-law slip through the broken window. That was it, though. I had had enough, and before she could gather her wits and figure out where to go to find my kids, I attacked her. I was just filled with blind rage, and I must have hit her with the bat over a dozen times. Part of me realized that I was overreacting just a bit, but I wasn't taking any chances. I had already lost my wife. I wasn't also going to lose my boys. After I realized that she was unconscious, I called the police and had them come out and arrest her for breaking and entering. Most people have mother-in-laws that are fairly decent people that they get along with quite well, but there are some that have quite the adversarial relationship like myself. Although after I tell you my story, maybe you might just agree with me that there aren't many that have mother-in-laws as bad as mine. To start with, my name is Joseph, and it's important that I mention that I had known my wife, Bethany, for several years. We had been friends for many years, and neither of us had had a lot of luck when it came to finding love. And one day we just looked at each other, realized that maybe we should give dating each other a try. Once we did, we realized that we should have done so sooner, as we were an amazing match for one another. Our friendship quickly blossomed into love. For the first time in my whole life, I felt truly happy and complete, but there were some hiccups on the horizon, unfortunately. The day came when we thought that it was time that we should introduce each other to our parents. It wasn't that we wanted their approval, really, but we felt that it was important that they know about each other since things were getting rather serious. And I'll be honest, I was beginning to plan just how I was going to propose to Bethany. We decided to introduce Bethany to my parents first, and it went rather well, actually. My parents truly seemed to like her, and I was incredibly relieved, but then it became my turn to meet Bethany's mother. Her father had passed away many years ago, and we were hopeful that maybe one day that she might move in with us. We were worried that she had been lonely since her husband had passed away, but boy, were we wrong. On the day that we invited her out for lunch to tell her about us, we had expected that she would take the news quite well and be happy for us.
Hey, Mom. So Joseph and I have some amazing news. We've moved on from being friends to dating. Mom, we are in love.
With this loser? Please tell me that you're joking.
Mom, what are you talking about? I thought that you liked Joseph.
Well, you thought wrong. I can't believe that you would want to date such a weak and pathetic man. Why can't you find a man like your father? He was such a handsome man and so strong, and Joseph just looks like he can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag.
It's okay, Bethany. She's allowed to not like me. But we had always thought that you did.
Well, that just proves how stupid that you are to think something so incredibly foolish.
I had no words to describe how awkward things felt after that. But Bethany and I loved each other, and we didn't really care whether or not she hated me. We had decided that we wanted to be with one another, and whether she approved or not wasn't our problem. Soon after that, I proposed to Bethany, and she accepted. Even though her mother clearly wouldn't be happy about it, we were ecstatic. Oddly enough, Bethany's mother was fairly quiet during the entire wedding, but it was plainly obvious that she was not happy about us getting married. Despite this, we enjoyed our new lives together and bought a small quaint house and started to try to have children. Both Bethany and I wanted to have kids, and we figured that we may as well start as soon as possible. The day that Bethany told me that she was pregnant was among the happiest days of my life, and when we found out that it was going to be twins as well, made us incredibly happy. For the first time since we had told Bethany's mother about our relationship, she actually seemed happy about our union.
Oh, this is quite the day. I can't wait to meet my grandchildren. I'm going to bring them everywhere with me.
Thank you, Mom. We're so happy that you are eager to babysit them. For sure, we'll happily need you to watch them from time to time.
Babysit? Oh yes, I guess it would be temporary, right?
I found it quite the odd thing to say, but at least she was no longer calling me names and was supportive for once. She still gave me dirty looks, but at least she no longer was insulting me. The pregnancy was incredibly difficult for Bethany, and she had to go on an early maternity leave, and the doctor warned us that things could be very dangerous for Bethany. We, of course, followed every direction the doctors gave us to try to make things safer and easier on Bethany and the twins. But the day that she went into labor, it wasn't looking very good. Bethany was in labor for over 24 hours. I was so incredibly worried, and the longer that it went on, the more I was worried that I was going to lose Bethany and the babies. Then the doctor came out of the delivery room, and the look on his face caused my heart to shatter. I'm so sorry, Joseph, but it was too much. We did save the twin boys. They are alive and well, but Bethany passed away. I am so very sorry. I went numb. Part of me was filled with relief that my children were alive, but at the same time, I couldn't imagine my life without Bethany. I wish I could say that I manned up and did what needed to be done, but I went catatonic and couldn't focus on anything. I was able to tell the doctor that both Bethany and I had wanted to name them Charlie and Edward, but after that, I was silent. Bethany's mother stepped up and helped out. She planned the funeral for me and even helped to care for the babies until I was finally able to come to terms with my loss. My parents helped as well, but Bethany's mother did most of the work. A few months after Bethany's death, I was still deep in my grief, but I was finally able to help out with the babies. Hey, what can I do to help? Can I feed them?
No, just go back to doing nothing. Clearly, that's all you're good for.
Sorry, but I was pretty distraught after losing my wife. But I've recovered enough from the trauma, and I would like to start bonding with the children that my wife and I wanted so much.
Well, that really isn't up to you. I'm their caregiver now. Just make yourself useful and jump off a bridge.
I couldn't believe her response. It was so callous and cold, and I had honestly thought that the loss of Bethany had finally made her see the light and to forget her hatred of me. But of course not. The next day, some police officers showed up and asked to be let into the house. Sir, we are sorry to bother you, but we had reports of someone selling drugs. Can we come in and have a look around? Drugs? No one here is selling drugs. But you can absolutely come in and check. I was so confused. But I let them inside and they searched my home, but after they found nothing, they apologized and left. That was when Bethany's mother came out and had an incredibly sour look on her face.
What were they doing here? Did they find your stash?
What stash? Did you call them and get them to come out here? Why would you do that?
Of course I did. You're absolutely useless, and I need you gone so that I can raise my children in peace.
Your children? What are you talking about? You're only their grandmother. Honestly, you've overstayed your welcome. I think it would be best if you were to leave. If you are going to pull stunts like that, then you need to leave. You can either leave now on your own, or I can call the police back and have them drag you away. Surprisingly, she left without another word. But I knew that that wasn't going to be the last of things, and so I made plans to go and stay with my parents just in case. I packed up everything that my boys would need and drove over to their house. The next day, more police officers showed up at my parents' home. I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I truly wasn't. Hi there, sir. Listen, we got a call that you were shaking your child in your home earlier today, and that you made threats against their grandmother this morning. Can you give us your statement on what happened? Well, I can tell you that it's a complete lie, since I've been here at my parents' home since early yesterday afternoon. They can vouch for that. I haven't seen their grandmother since yesterday morning, and I would never in a million years shake my boys. Their grandmother is just filing false reports in an attempt to get me in trouble so she can take the boys away from me. My parents gave their testimonies, and the police inspected my sons and saw how happy and healthy they were. And so they apologized once again and left, but not before telling me that they would be filing false allegation charges against my mother-in-law. I wasn't going to hold my breath, of course, though, and I just figured that maybe that would be the end of it for a bit. Although I would need to speak to a lawyer about getting a restraining order against my mother-in-law, and possibly what else I could do to stop her from calling the police and making false reports about me. However, that night, I got a notification from my security system that someone had broken into my home. When the police showed up, they didn't find anyone, and thankfully, nothing was taken. And so I just knew that it had been my mother-in-law. After I got off the phone with them, I knew that there was a chance that she might come to my parents' house next and try to break in and kidnap my children. Knowing this, after my parents went to bed, I turned off all the lights and waited in the living room in the dark with a baseball bat. I knew that there was a high chance that my mother-in-law wouldn't come to their house the same night, but I wasn't taking any risks. Close to midnight, I heard someone on the front porch, followed a few seconds later by a window in the living room breaking, and then in the darkness, I saw my mother-in-law slip through the broken window. That was it, though. I had had enough, and before she could gather her wits and figure out where to go to find my kids, I attacked her. I was just filled with blind rage, and I must have hit her with the bat over a dozen times. Part of me realized that I was overreacting just a bit, but I wasn't taking any chances. I had already lost my wife. I wasn't also going to lose my boys. After I realized that she was unconscious, I called the police and had them come out and arrest her for breaking and entering. Since the also was carrying rope, zip ties, and had baby seats on the porch, it was plainly obvious that she had been planning to kidnap my boys as well. They hauled her away to jail. A short time later, she was put in front of a judge, and he deemed her unfit to stand trial on account of being mentally unwell, but he did force her to be sent to a treatment facility. It amounted to essentially going to prison, but was more like a hospital with armed guards. Even though it wasn't prison, I still felt very safe though, as apparently when I had attacked her, I had done serious damage to her spine, and she was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Seeing as how I was grief-stricken and had merely been defending my family, I had been let off with a warning and community service for attacking her. Part of me really regrets that it had gone down like that though. After all, she was my wife's mother and my son's grandmother, but I truly didn't have a choice. At least, I don't think I did. What do you think? Hello? I'm Aaron, and my story began when I was only 4. On a night when my mom made me pack a bag and put me in the car. They strapped me into a car seat with my teddy bear on my lap and my backpack by my feet. Mommy, what are we doing?
Shut up.
Daddy, what's wrong? Stop talking, Aaron. I felt so confused and scared, and I didn't understand what was going on. But I did know that my parents didn't like me much. However, my twin sister was perfect, pretty, and smart in their eyes. I knew they liked her more. I couldn't help but resent her and them for it. We drove for hours, and I grew more and more scared. Eventually, I started to cry.
Shut up.
But I couldn't stop. I I cried right up until we stopped, and I was picked up out of the car seat and left standing on the sidewalk outside of a vaguely familiar house. Mommy, what are we doing here? We? Nothing. But you? You're moving in. You'll never amount to anything, Aaron. We can't waste our time with you when your sister is the one who will make us money. And they climbed back into the car, laughing at me while I stood on the sidewalk crying. They drove away, and I didn't know what to do. I was tired, so I dragged my bag up to the house and curled into the porch swing and held my teddy tight. When I woke up, my aunt was crouched down beside me, and she had a hand on my shoulder.
Aaron, darling, are you okay?
No. Mommy and Daddy left me here.
I'm sorry, Aaron. They called me this morning and told me that they didn't want 2 children, only 1. And they said that your sister was a good business investment. But don't worry, I'll look after you. Come inside. Let's get you a nice hot bath and something to eat.
My aunt carried me inside, and that was the start of my new life. My aunt wasn't a wealthy woman, but she made enough for us. I went to school and studied hard, and I never forgot the feeling of being left behind. I never reached out to my parents, but I always figured that they would attempt to reconnect one day. But I wasn't going to hold my breath. Instead, I let my aunt become my entire family. She was my mom and my best friend. During the holidays, we would spend it with her friends and their children. I never wallowed in the pain of what my parents did. I went to counseling and wrote music to express myself. I wrote books and poems. I made myself a creative conduit for all the emotions I've ever had. I was a creator. One day, when I was 15, I was playing in a local bar for tips and free meals. The boss knew my aunt, and on the nights that she had late shifts, they invited me to play and gave me an empty booth at the back in which to eat and study. I had just finished my set to a rousing applause when someone I found vaguely familiar approached me. She was my age and had blonde hair and blue eyes, just like me.
Hi?
Hello?
I know who you are. Do you know who I am?
I have my suspicions.
I'm your twin sister.
I had assumed this would happen one day, but I expected my parents to be there too. Is it weird that I don't even remember your name?
Yes, it is. Didn't Auntie tell you about me?
She told me she hasn't seen you since they abandoned me.
Abandon is so dramatic.
And accurate. They left me in the street. They didn't even call my aunt until the next morning. They laughed while I stood on the sidewalk and cried.
So you remember a random night when you were 4 and not my name?
I remember the things that matter.
Then you better start remembering me. I've won so many medals and trophies in gymnastics that I'm basically famous. They're talking about sending me to the Olympics.
I couldn't understand what she wanted. Was she really here just to brag? What do you want?
I was just coming to see whether they made the right choice.
Well, consider me flattered that you found me enough of a threat that you had to come all the way down to see me in person. You can leave now.
I'm not here to flatter you. I just couldn't find you on the internet. Must be because you're such a nobody.
Not quite. I just changed my last name. She obviously hadn't considered this at all, and she started to scowl at me.
You know, there aren't any baby photos in the house because of you.
Sorry?
You should be. They basically started anew after they got rid of you, which means all my friends think I'm adopted because I can't show them baby photos because you were in all of them.
What do you want from me? I've done nothing wrong, and you're here to rub my nose in the fact that they kept you? If I had my way, I'd never hear from any of you again. Now please leave. If you don't, I'll have the bouncer show you out.
No, you wouldn't.
I stood up and waved my hand at the bouncer, Tommy. He was a big guy who I became friends with after he was assigned to watch over me the first few nights I was at the bar. He nodded and started walking towards me. Immediately, my sister's eyes went wide and she backed away.
Oh my God, fine. But just so you know, I'm glad my parents kicked you to the curb.
Feelings mutual. I'm blessed that I didn't have to grow up around someone so conceited and horrible. It felt like a fever dream the moment she left the bar. Tommy asked if I was okay, and I told him I was fine, but I was confused and a little hurt too. Why would she go so far out of her way to make me feel bad? When I got home that night, my aunt was still at work, and so I went to the couch and laid down. I tried watching some random videos on the internet, but although I wanted to drown out my thoughts, nothing seemed to work. Sometime in the early morning, my aunt woke me up.
Aaron, you shouldn't sleep on the sofa. It's not good for you, and you're too big for me to carry you upstairs.
Sorry.
Hey, what's wrong?
My twin came to the bar last night. I quickly explained what had happened, and my aunt grew angrier as I told her what happened.
My sister is the worst. She was always like that when we were younger. I'm better than you, so you're worthless. Mom loves me more because I got a better score on our science test. She harped on about it for ages. It really messed with me when I was younger.
That's why she left me with you? Because she thinks we're both worthless?
No matter what your mother believed, you are never worthless. It doesn't matter what you do, you're still worth something, and everyone is worthy of love.
My aunt was the best at making me feel better. So even with the stark reminder that one family had abandoned me, I still had a different one that never would. Oddly enough, it was the trauma from my past that I started to make a name for myself. I think it was partially because of how she bullied me about not being on the internet much, but I really wanted to prove her, and by extension my family, wrong. And so I uploaded some of my music to the internet. I put it on a niche site where people shared their music and stories with each other, but one of my songs was uploaded to a popular music sharing website, and it became a viral hit overnight. I woke up on a random Thursday to a million messages on my phone, and my aunt excitedly calling me downstairs. By this time, I was 20 and gangly. I had a mess of blonde hair and preferred to wear my high school basketball uniform on days when I didn't have to go to college. It was like this, fresh out of bed and confused as hell, that I met the CEO of the biggest record company in the country. Aaron, is it? Thank you for coming down to meet me. I'm the CEO of Rich Records, and this morning, my daughter came to me and begged me to listen to the new, biggest song in the world. At first, I was worried that our competition had started making waves, but I realized soon enough that you were unrepresented. So, I'm here to offer you representation. Do you have more songs? I stood there for a while with my mouth hanging open like an idiot.
Aaron has an entire library of music he's written. He's really very creative, always writing something. Books, poetry, music.
Seems you've got a lot of talent going on. We could use someone of your ability. It was too much too fast. I was overwhelmed. I had expected this to be a lazy day where I played video games with my friends and studied. I had not planned on being internationally famous on a fluke, but I had to take the bull by the horns. It would be an honor to work with your company, sir. That same day, the CEO took me and my aunt shopping to buy new clothes for a big meeting with his employees. Then, he flew us to the capital city in his private jet, where I met with his creative advisors, and we discussed the breadth of what I had to offer. By the end of the day, I had a record deal and had several tour dates booked. The single was released a week later, and it was the fastest-selling single in the whole history of the company. In no time at all, I was one of the richest musicians in the world, and my name was everywhere. Things were moving so quickly, and before I knew it, I was juggling school and performing at concert venues to massive crowds of adoring fans. I couldn't believe my good fortune. To show my appreciation to my aunt for all that she had done for me, I paid off her mortgage and gave her enough money so that she could retire and travel with me when I went on tour. I also put her in charge of managing my finances, as I knew that she was far more responsible with money than I was. While on tour, I happened to walk by a TV that was broadcasting sports news, and I heard my sister's name, which drew my attention. Apparently, there was a scandal involving her and a few of her teammates. All of them had been taking performance-enhancing drugs, and they had been caught. It didn't sound like they would face any legal repercussions. But she had been denied the ability to go to the Olympics, and her career as a gymnast was over. I couldn't help but chuckle when I heard that. She had been so proud of going to the Olympics, and now she had been caught cheating and would be lucky if she could get a job as a cleaning lady. Several months later, after my tour was finished, my aunt and I went home to relax for a bit before my next tour. As we approached my aunt's house, there sitting on the front porch were my parents and my twin sister. All three of them looked dirty and dressed in torn clothing. At first I wasn't sure it was them and thought that 3 homeless people had wandered onto my aunt's porch. But as we got closer, I realized who they were.
There you are. We've been waiting for days for you to come home.
For what? Why are you here?
Well, there was a bit of a misunderstanding and we're going through a bit of a rough patch. Just let us inside and we'll tell you how you can help. Excuse me, but we aren't inviting you monsters into our home. After what you did to Aaron all those years ago, you have some nerve. You're just lucky that we don't call the police and have you charged with trespassing.
How can you be so heartless? after I was caught with the steroids that Mom and Dad gave me. We lost everything. We couldn't pay our bills and ended up losing our house.
In other words, you were living outside of your means and the debt caught up to you then? Well, that really isn't our problem. You kicked us both out of the family years ago, and you don't have any right to come demanding for us to help you now that you're flat broke. I pulled out my cell phone and called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. Thankfully, my parents and sister were distracted by talking to my aunt, and so they didn't notice until the police pulled up, and by then, it was too late. And they were loaded up into the squad cars and taken away. We later heard that when they were taken to the police station and were processed, that they found steroids on all three of them, and they were then arrested. It was quite the surprise, especially when they were put on trial, and between the Olympics scandal and being arrested with steroids on them. The judges in their cases weren't very lenient on them, and gave them each 10 years in prison. It felt rather fitting that we got to see karma in action, actually. My parents had abandoned me because they were convinced that my sister was the one that would make something out of herself. And yet I had been the one to strike it rich and famous. Although, I guess she did become famous as well, but for all the wrong reasons. There are times, though, that I wondered that if they hadn't abandoned me, if things would still have turned out the way that they did, and I honestly don't think that they would have. After all, my aunt had been the one to really make me believe in myself, and without her influence, I don't think I would be half the artist that I am today. So even though my parents hurt me more than anyone else on this planet ever could, they helped to ensure my future success by giving me to the one person that would love me more than anyone else in the world. Of course, when they do get out of prison, they'll be dirt poor and will probably come begging for money, and I'll just have to hire plenty of bodyguards to keep them away, even though I have them to thank for putting me where I needed to be in order to become successful. I still have no desire or need for toxic people like them in my life. Thanks for watching. Hi, I'm Alec. My story began in the hectic halls of a busy marketing office. There, I met Sarah, a cute and smart floor manager. The second that I saw her, I couldn't look away. I liked her so much, and we laughed a lot, which could be heard around the office. Our love grew, and the next thing we did was plan our big day. We chose to have a beautiful Hawaiian wedding. Being a destination wedding, we only invited our best friends, and we treated them to lots of great food and festivities. We even had an Elvis impersonator sing to us. The big day arrived, and we said our vows, and we were both so happy. After the ceremony, though, I began to notice some weird things happening. During the reception, I noticed Sarah getting really cozy with my best friend Jim. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just the excitement of the day. Little did I know, my new bride and my best friend would go on more secret dates and meetings. As weeks passed, I started noticing small changes in Sarah. Late nights at work, secretive phone calls. My heart felt that something was wrong. One day, I decided to confront her, hoping that I was just being paranoid and that my suspicions were unjustified. But I just couldn't shake the fact that I felt that something drastic had changed. We were newlyweds, but it almost felt like Sarah was being a bit distant. Sarah, what's going on? You've been distant lately. Is there something you're not telling me? Is everything okay?
Oh, Alec, it's just work stress. You know how it is. I promise that once things at work even out a bit, that I'll feel like my old self once again.
But deep down, I knew it was more than just work stress. I know that it was a complete invasion of privacy, but I wanted to know what was bothering Sarah so much, and so I looked at her cell phone. After all, it was possible that her boss or someone at work was harassing her, or making her work far too much, and she felt that she couldn't tell me. It was then that I discovered the affair between Sarah and Jim. Among the messages to her colleagues were a bunch of messages to Jim that made my blood boil. I saw some steamy text messages between them. The pain was like a knife to my heart. Yet, rather than turning to anger, a plan began to form in my mind. I decided to play the long game. Instead of getting her to admit the affair, I began gathering evidence. When I had the chance, I would check her phone and download the text messages and emails she shared with Jim. I even set up some microphones in her car and around our house and secretly recorded conversations capturing their betrayal. I reached out to a private investigator to help me record more secret meetings and get photos of them sneaking around with one another. Weeks turned into months, and I bided my time, carefully planning out each detail. I wanted to make my case against them as airtight as possible. One Friday evening, armed with more than enough proof, I invited both Sarah and Jim to a meeting. Their faces turned pale as I laid out the evidence before them. I showed them pictures of the two kissing in a car and also video evidence of them at a hotel room together. I know about the affair. I've got evidence, photos, and videos of the two of you together. But here's the deal. You're going to sign these divorce papers, Sarah, and you, Jim, are going to cut ties and disappear from my life. If you refuse Jim, I will tell your wife.
Alec, you can't just come in here and accuse us. You're being stupid.
Yeah, Alec, this is ridiculous. You're being crazy. Crazy? Ridiculous? I have emails, text messages, and recordings. Your lies are crystal clear, Sarah. And Jim, you were supposed to be my best friend.
Alec, it's not that simple. You've been distant, wrapped up in your work. We needed something more.
More? Is that what you call it? Lying to your spouse and your so-called best friend for more? You've broken the vows we took, the trust we built. Why did you even agree to marry me? Alec, listen, it just happened. We never meant for it to get this far. Just happened? Jim, you were there when I said my vows. You stood beside me. And you, Sarah, you were supposed to be my partner in this journey. Instead, you've both stabbed me in the back.
Alec, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. We got carried away, and I'm sorry.
Sorry won't undo the damage. Now, you have a choice. Sign the divorce papers and vanish from my life, or I will tell the truth to your parents and Jim's wife. Your reputation will fall, and everyone will know what kind of people you truly are. Everyone in the room was pretty silent. It was as if my wife and my friend finally accepted that their lies were out in the open. Because Sarah was afraid of her parents finding out, Sarah signed the divorce papers, and Jim vanished from our lives as if he had never existed. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. The divorce was painful, but in its aftermath, I discovered strength. I redirected the bad energy that came about, and I took up yoga and deep breathing exercises. Slowly, I felt better, and I came out stronger than ever. I even took part in a 10K race. Life has a funny way of turning things around. A few weeks later, Anne, who was also the president of the company where I worked, found out about the affair. I had told a few close friends, and because I had never told them not to tell anyone, they had spread the word about why I had gotten divorced. Anne had also been divorced years before because her husband at the time had cheated on her, and she hated cheaters. Because of this, she chose to fire Jim, who also worked at the same company but higher up than myself. With Jim out of the company, I had a chance to get ahead. I learned Jim's old job and took on more duties. Surprisingly, my work didn't go unnoticed. The higher-ups recognized my long nights and promoted me to a position I never thought possible. As word spread about the affair and Jim's firing, people outside my company began to talk about my divorce. I had friends that I hadn't spoken to in years saying that they were sorry to hear that Sarah had cheated on me. They even shared the gossip that Sarah was not doing very well and was struggling at her job. She had messed up a few accounts, and the company that she worked for had given her several warnings until one day, they fired her. The last thing I had heard was that she was living at home with her mom and dad in a one-bedroom apartment. She used to live in a townhouse with me, but now she lives in a very cramped space. After my divorce, I had the craziest of luck. I won a large amount of money in the lottery that allowed me to have financial freedom. It was a nice victory, especially knowing I didn't have to share it with my ex-wife. With all that money, I was able to start new hobbies and continue old ones. I traveled and went on mini vacations to Europe. I used some of the money to make sure my mom and dad have around-the-clock care because my parents are elderly and need help around the house. I also had more time to connect with old friends who stood by me during my difficult time with my ex-wife and ex-friend. We now spend time together and have evenings where we go bowling or have dinner together. I also want to say that more good things happened. Love found me again. I met this great woman who loved me for myself. My new fiancée, Becky, met me while I was out walking my poodle. She also has a Pekingese dog, and our blended family includes dogs, cats, and a new baby. Right now, I'm told that Jim is working as a dishwasher on a college campus, and Sarah, who is heavy with guilt, chooses to spend time as a volunteer in a homeless shelter as a way to pay for her lies. Everything worked out in my favor, and karma has a way of making everything go right. Good people like me are rewarded, and bad people are punished. After she moved in, she began to really harass Brad. At first, it was just inappropriate hugs at odd times. Like he would be standing in the kitchen, and she would run up behind him and hug him and squeeze his chest with her hands. Or she would sit next to him at dinner time, and she would squeeze his thigh under the table. Hi there, my name is Mason, and boy, do I have a story to tell you. To start off with, my younger brother Brad and I grew up with our parents in a gorgeous home in an affluent neighborhood. Our parents both had very good paying jobs and were the kind of married couple that everyone else looked at with envy. They truly did love one another, and we were a very happy family. Sadly, that all changed though when my mother was driving to work early one morning and there was terrible fog. No one knows how the accident actually happened, but there was a 12-car pile-up on the freeway, and unfortunately, our mother was at the center of it. While on her way to the hospital, she passed away. The funeral was just terrible. Both my brother and I were teenagers, but it still hit us very hard and took months before we could even think about her without crying. Our father took it the hardest and tried his best to comfort us while he was in a living hell, having lost the true love of his life. It was hard watching him mope around the house. He almost looked like a zombie in search of brains that he could never find. To make matters worse, he always wore the same jogging pants and t-shirt for weeks on end. Thankfully, he was still bathing, but his clothes were beginning to smell a bit ripe. Eventually, Brad and I had had enough, and we approached him. Dad, listen. We miss Mom just as much as you do, and we can understand that you're hurting right now. But you can't just give up on life and mope around the house. We know it's hard, but what if you were to start dating again?
I don't know, boys. I don't know if that's a good idea. Mason is right, Dad. If you don't want to date, that's okay with us, but you have to snap out of this. Mom wouldn't want you wasting your life away sitting on chair and doing nothing. She would want you to be happy.
She would especially want you to start wearing more than one set of clothes. Seriously, Dad, that shirt and those pants need to burn at this point. There isn't a washing machine strong enough to clean them. We all had a good laugh at that, and the next day, Brad and I were happily surprised to see our father wearing different clothes. His whole mood seemed to have shifted overnight, and for the first time in months, we were happy. However, that didn't last very long. Shortly after that, our father created a dating profile online and was starting to go on dates. We didn't think any of them were very serious until he brought home a woman. She was around the same age as he was, but she didn't have any children. Her name was Monica, and she struck me as very fake and not someone I would ever picture my father with. But he did seem happy. As the weeks passed by, Monica began to spend more and more time at our home. Neither Brad or I were very happy about this, and were doubly so when she officially moved in. The only real difference, though, was that she made a point to try to win Brad over. If I hadn't known better, I would have said that she would even flirt with him every now and then. She would wear low-cut tops and would always lean over and pick things up in front of him. Part of me just wondered if I was being too suspicious, but then I went and privately asked Brad about what he thought of things. Hey, maybe I'm overthinking things, but what's your take on Monica?
Honestly, I'm not a fan. She seems to make Dad happy, but she keeps saying and doing weird things around me. It kind of makes me feel uncomfortable.
What kinds of weird things?
Well, like purposefully walking around after taking a shower wearing nothing but a towel.
Yeah, that is odd, but some people do that. Maybe she was in a rush to get ready for something.
No. This usually happens when I'm home alone with her. And she's even accidentally dropped the towel a couple of times too. The last time, I ran out of the house and went for a bike ride because after she stood there naked in front of me, she winked at me suggestively.
I knew then that I hadn't been wrong about her, but I also didn't know how to approach my dad and talk to him about all these things. Which in hindsight was a massive mistake, as he and Monica came home one day and announced that they had gone down to City Hall and had gotten married in a spur-of-the-moment decision. I tried my best to act happy for them, but after what Brad had said to me, I couldn't help but worry that my father had made a terrible mistake. After that, Monica officially moved in. It didn't take her long to start making herself at home, and she even began redecorating the house the way that she liked without so much as checking in with the rest of us. After she moved in, she began to really harass Brad. At first, it was just inappropriate hugs at odd times. Like he would be standing in the kitchen and she would run up behind him and hug him and squeeze his chest with her hands. Or she would sit next to him at dinner time and she would squeeze his thigh under the table. Brad kept coming to tell me about these incidents, but neither of us could figure out a way to approach our dad with this information. After all, it would be her word against ours, and so I came up with a plan to catch her in the act. Brad and I went online and ordered some cameras that we could hide around the house, and once we caught her in the act, we could then show our father so that we could open his eyes to who Monica really was. A couple days after the cameras were installed, though, our father became ill. Brad and I were terrified as we were forced to call him an ambulance as he had a stroke. It made no sense that he would have one, as he was young and ate right and worked out fairly often. Once he was in the hospital, though, things took a turn for the worse as he suffered an even worse stroke and died. We were all very confused. Our father had gone from very healthy and happy to being so sick that he died within the matter of hours. In the days that followed, we held a funeral service for him, followed by the reading of his will. Both Brad and I were in a daze and were barely functioning. We were only in our late teens and had already lost both of our parents, and now we were being forced to live with this woman that neither of us liked or trusted. The only comfort came when the will was read, and shockingly, all of our father's belongings, money, and properties were given to the two of us. He hadn't had enough time to update his will and include Monica, it would seem, which was just as fitting. I was given ownership of the lake house, while Brad was given the deed to the house we all lived in. The lawyer did let us know that he had been in the process of updating our father's will to include Monica, but that he had hit several snags and had been unable to make it official before he had passed away. I was actually surprised when I looked over at Monica and saw that she wasn't upset by not getting anything. For the first time, I wondered if maybe she actually did love my father and that she was okay not inheriting anything from him. However, a few days later, she began to harass Brad more than she had ever done before. Now that our father was no longer alive, she began to drop being very subtle about things and openly made advances on him.
Oh, Brad, you are such a handsome young man. Surely you've thought about me once or twice. I've seen the way that you look at my body when I'm wearing nothing but a towel.
Monica, you're my stepmom. This is incredibly wrong.
Oh, don't be so shy. Just know that I never lock the door when I shower or sleep, just in case you want to pay me a visit. I'll always welcome the company.
We now had video evidence, but without our father to show it to, neither Brad or I knew what to do with it. Confused and not knowing even what our next steps should be, we turned to an online forum and posted under an alias about everything that had happened and asked the people online what our options could be. Within a week, someone responded and began asking questions that felt very odd. They knew exactly what Monica looked like, although they referred to her as Angela, and oddly enough, they even knew about the tattoo that Monica had on her thigh that we only knew about because of her towel incidents. They described the tattoo in great detail. Neither Brad or I knew what to do with this information, but we asked the person that posted if they would be willing to meet up and talk about this. The next day, we met a woman who was around our age named Hillary. She claimed that Monica had married her father, and that once she had been included in his will, that he had had a stroke and died as a result. Hillary couldn't prove that Monica had been responsible, but after she had been given her portion of the inheritance, she had left Hillary to fend for herself, but only after selling the family home, leaving Hillary without any alternative other than to live with her aunt and uncle. When she had read our post, she knew that Monica was the same woman that had married her father and was hoping that somehow she could get revenge on her. Okay, so if it is the same person, then how do we prove it?
Well, I looked it up, and there are poisons that can cause a stroke, and they are mostly untraceable. My theory is that Monica poisoned both of our fathers in order to get their inheritance money, and I doubt that we are the only families that she has done this to.
Okay, so how do we prove it if the poison is untraceable?
The poison might be untraceable, but I know of a way that we can prove that she gave it to our father.
Brad then pulled out his laptop. He had programmed the cameras around the house to upload the footage that they had recorded to his laptop at the end of every day so that they videos could be saved. And sure enough, when we went through them, we saw Monica put some powder into our father's food, and hours later, he had his stroke. We even saw where Monica hid the rest of the powder, and with this information, we ran straight to the police and handed over the evidence we had gathered. It took them less than 5 minutes to see what we had, and then send out a squad car to arrest Monica and to collect the remaining powder from its hiding spot. Over the next couple of months, the police were able to investigate Monica and her past very thoroughly, and found that she had changed her name and had used many aliases over the years, and that she had been married over a dozen times. All of her husbands dying from strokes and leaving her with large amounts of money, and when the money ran out, she would change her name and get remarried. They were able to pin the murders of all the men that she had been married to on her. And when she went to court, she was sentenced to stay in prison for the rest of her life. Having her finally out of our lives has been a huge relief, and we are grateful that we were able to bring justice not only for our father, but for the other men that she had murdered. Both Brad and I agreed that he was no doubt going to be her next target. After not getting anything from the death of our father, she had then set sights on Brad to get what he had inherited. We do visit her every now and then in prison, just to rub her nose in the fact that we are free and enjoying our lives. Maybe it's mean for us to do, but the sadness and anger that we see on her face every time that we visit is priceless. She took our father from us, and we will make sure that she feels no amount of joy whatsoever for the rest of her life. As for us, well, both Brad and I will be attending college in the fall. Our inheritance from our father has ensured that we have a bright future set up for us. Having school completely paid for and owning our own homes will definitely give us an advantage in our lives. And as luck would have it, I have even begun dating someone, and things are really getting serious too. After Monica was arrested, I kept in touch with Hillary, and it turned out that we have a lot in common and began to date soon after that. We were later told that the guards found Monica beaten to death because the inmates kept harassing and beating her every day, but the prison guards just ignored her. Monica is now in eternal purgatory, where she can't escape from the beatings from all the people she had killed. Hopefully, that will be the last bit of heartache that any of us will have to endure. My younger sister was the absolute favorite. She was always doted on since the day she was born. It got worse, though, after her first beauty pageant when she was 2 years old. She won the crown and stole every drop of my mother's affection from then on. My name is Jaden, and my childhood was horrible. It was just the three of us: Mom, me, and Gabriella. My younger sister was the absolute favorite. She was always doted on since the day she was born. It got worse, though, after her first beauty pageant when she was 2 years old. She won the crown and stole every drop of my mother's affection from then on. There were pictures of her on stages winning sashes and tiaras all over the mantle and fridge. Not a single photo of me. It got worse once I was 9 and she was 6.
Jaden, we need more space to store all of Gabriella's pageantry costumes. I'm just going to put them in your room. You don't mind, do you?
I told her I did mind. A lot. That was my room. Gabriella already had her own bigger bedroom with a walk-in closet. How many clothes did she really need?
Well, she's actually doing something with her life, making a name for herself and networking with powerful people. And besides, it's my house. I'm just letting you use your room out of the goodness of my heart.
I pointed out that I was only 9, but she didn't care. Precious Gabriella had already won a full shelf of awards, become friends with rich kids who could take her on expensive trips, all while she was younger than me. I told her I still had my whole life ahead of me to become successful.
Don't be stupid. You'll never amount to anything. You've already missed the boat.
That year, my family forgot my 10th birthday. When I woke up that Saturday morning, I couldn't smell pancakes cooking or any of my favorite breakfasts. I went downstairs and saw no decorations. My mother was making oatmeal, my least favorite, but just enough for one person. I looked at the table and saw Gabriella in her pre-pageant sweatpants and t-shirt, hair all done up with glitter and pigtails and pearls.
Oh, there you are, Jaden. Cut up the fruit for your sister's breakfast.
I was too stunned to speak. I picked up the knife and started cutting strawberries. With each slice, I realized this wasn't a joke. They had really forgotten. I wasn't special enough to them for them to even remember the day I was born. After I was done making my sister's breakfast, they left in the car, leaving me all alone in the empty house. I searched the house for presents. Nothing. They didn't even come back that night, Mom ignoring my calls. I had to fend for myself for dinner, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and cried myself to sleep. Happy birthday to me. When they came back the next afternoon, Mother acted like they hadn't done anything wrong.
We were supposed to come back last night, but your sister was so tired from winning the competition, so I booked us a hotel room. I'm sure you didn't mind.
I told her she could have at least called and told me. Answered one of my many calls.
We were too busy at the celebration party afterwards. It slipped my mind. You're a big kid after all, you were fine.
By this time, more than half my room was full of my sister's stuff. Bags of 2 small dresses, boxes and boxes of toys that didn't fit in her own room, and other things my mother bought her just because. The walls of stuff were creeping in on me. They made it so I couldn't find my homework sometimes.
I got a call from the school. You didn't turn in your homework again. What is wrong with you? You're worthless. Why can't you be more like your sister and be gifted at something?
I told her I had done my homework. I had just lost it in all the stuff in my room. She didn't believe me and locked me in my bedroom until I could apologize properly for making her day worse. The walls of clutter surrounded me, seeming to move closer and closer. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking and my breathing hurt. There was no way I was going to be able to find my homework and prove to her I had done it while I was having a panic attack. Besides, even if I did find it, it wouldn't change the fact that I had ruined her day already because of the phone call from the school. Minutes turned into hours. I made myself as small as possible in a corner on my bed to try and get away from the looming piles of things that represented my sister, my own neglect. At last, after dinner, Mom let me out.
Well, what do you have to say for yourself?
I swallowed back tears, breathing the fresh air coming in from the open door. I told her I never wanted her to do that again, to please believe me that I had done my homework. She scoffed, slapped me, and locked me in again. I couldn't take it. I had had enough. I moved piles of boxes from the window, kicked out the screen, and climbed out. Running away from home was my only option. But where could I go? Remembering my uncle's address, I ran for it. It was a couple of miles away, and it started to rain on me. But I persisted. Over an hour later, with my hair stuck to my forehead and clothing dripping wet, I knocked on his door. "Jaden, what are you doing here? Come in, come in." I explained everything that had happened. He gave me my own room and helped me get better from the cold I caught from running in the rain. Life with Uncle Duran was the complete opposite of what it had been in my mom's house. It was the first time I remembered anyone ever helping me when I was sick. He celebrated my birthday and got me a basketball. It was a brand new one, perfect and just for me. Each thump as it bounced off the pavement was music to my ears. Uncle Duran practiced with me on the driveway for hours on the weekends until I got good. Each call of support from Uncle Darren as he practiced with me made my heart soar. He'd give me pointers and help me sign up to try out for a team. I worked hard in school. Only Uncle Darren showed up for my graduation. After high school, I got a basketball scholarship for the college of my choice. Full ride. I didn't tell my mom or sister though, just Uncle Duran. "I am so proud of you, Jaden. You've earned this." After college, I was drafted onto a professional team. I had a great starting salary and was a star player. I could make free throws, layups, and dunk like no one's business. Our championship games were on television, broadcast for the whole world to see. A week before the championship finals, a reporter came to interview me. She wanted to do a story about me and the struggles that I had growing up, and so I told her all about how my mother had prioritized my sister over me and how she abused me, and I was forced to run away and live with my uncle. But that had been the best decision that I had ever made, as it set my life on a much better trajectory. While I told her how my mom locked me in my room, the reporter almost broke down in tears. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone and saw hundreds of notifications from random people. The story was going viral, and people were cheering me on for overcoming my struggles and for running away from a very toxic and evil mother. I could only assume that while I was getting so much support from people that my mother was getting the exact opposite, but I honestly didn't care. On the night of the championship finals, an argument started up on the side of the court just before the start of the game.
That's my son. Jaden is my child. Jaden, you need to help us.
An older woman and a college-age girl were yelling at an usher. I looked over and did a double take. It was my mom dressed in cheap, worn clothing. I wasn't sure why all of a sudden she finally came to find me after all these years, but I suspected that it had something to do with the story about me. My sister, Gabriella, was with her too. Gabriella was no longer the bubbly beauty of her pageant days. Instead, she looked like she had gotten in with the wrong crowd, her cheeks too hollow and eyes too sunken. I'd heard about what drugs could do to people, and that's exactly what they had described. I was shocked when she spoke.
Jaden, if you don't retract the story, people will continue to make our lives a living hell.
And of course, they had only come to see me because the truth had come out, and now they were facing repercussions for all the abuse that they had put me through. It made me sick that they still only cared about their own needs. The usher told them to stay put and came up to me. Sorry about this, Jaden. Do you know these two? They claim to be your family and want to speak with you. I looked the two women in the eye and said to the usher, I don't know them. They're no family of mine. Both of the girls squawked in indignance.
How dare you, Jaden? After all I did for you.
You selfish loser. I wish Mom had had an abortion instead of giving birth to you.
I turned my back on them and went onto the basketball court. It was the best game I had ever played. The ball flew from teammate to teammate, the crowd roaring in excitement. Uncle Duran cheered us on from his special spot on the side. I had gotten revenge on my mother and sister. I had escaped their world and not let them invade mine. I later found out that Gabriella had been addicted to drugs prior to the story coming out, but after it did, she began to do them way more and was in constant danger of overdosing. My mother was forced to spend all of her money on trying to get her into rehab, but it never worked. After a bit, they were forced to leave the country as people continued to attack them because of the story. The last that I heard about them, they were living in another country and were struggling with bills. I can only assume just how miserable their lives had become. I even heard both of them are now janitors and are struggling to survive. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.